Assembly Quality Municipal Services Ethics and Elections Committee. I'll call us to order at 12:03 p.m. We're scheduled Wednesday, April 30th, 12 noon to 1 p.m. I'll go ahead and start with introductions.
Yarrow Silvers.
Zach Johnson.
Daniel Voland.
Felix Rivera.
Jimmy Hines, Municipal Clerk.
Liz Edwards, Deputy Election Administrator.
Wonderful. All right, so we have two items on our agenda. I think for item B, I had hoped to get a little bit more information from Chair Constant, but he's currently traveling, so I think we'll go ahead and table item B on our agenda for now. And we will just have an elections overview. I'll go ahead and turn it over to the clerk.
Thanks. So our election went very well this year. We think a big part of, well, as we mentioned in the meeting for certification, our number of rejections based on no sig match was reduced quite a bit. It's typically in the 600s, and it was about 386 this year. And so we think a big part of that is the database that we had designed in 23 and it was built in 24. And so what this database does is allows us to keep the signatures that we've gotten over time from the state, from the voter registration files, and lets us keep the wet signatures in priority over digital signatures from the DMV. People just don't sign the same on the electronic pads as they do on a real piece of paper. And so, so that we think helped out a lot. Voter turnout was, slightly lower than we've typically seen, but again, I think that is also in part to our voter rolls being a little bit overinflated. And I think the legislature is continuing to work on ways to get that cleaned up. Hopefully soon. One of the issues that I think is possible is that PFD application is considered voter contact to the Division of Elections. And so even if somebody hasn't voted, when they apply for their PFD, the Division of Elections considers that as voter contact. And so when they've made voter contact every year, even though they haven't voted, they may have never voted. And they're still in the voter rolls as having contact every year. It's just one of the issues that I think might be affecting their ability to remove people. That might be something to look at. And so as we continue to look at our processes, back in 21 and 22, I think it was for the mayoral runoff in 21, they opened up a second vote center in the Wilda Marston Theater to take some of the pressure off of chambers. There was some talk that people were being encouraged to wait until election day to vote and go vote in person. And so they, to mitigate the being overrun, the clerk opened up a second AVC in the Wilda Marston. And that has been less and less needed over time. This year, we only opened it on election day. And the chair of the LUSAC has indicated that she thinks that it's not needed anymore. And so in combination with our new data map, which shows us not voter turnout, but where the ballots are coming from over the course of the election, I wondered if it made sense to try to open up a vote center in other areas of town and also have pop-ups. this is all very just like ideas that came into our heads. They're very not sought out or looked into at all. But I was wondering if the ASD admin building being on Northern Lights and Boniface could potentially be a good partner to place a vote center in. Having been absentee vote center in the city of Kenai, I know that when people see vote here signs on the street, they go in and vote. And so I was thinking that having signs on Northern Lights and Boniface would encourage people to go in and vote. Especially if the other factor to this is, and I fall into this category, I don't listen to the radio. I listen to streamed music from my phone. I only read the newspaper because of my job, and I typically don't watch the news. And so who else falls in this category with me? Potentially a lot of people. And so how can I reach people who maybe are like me and don't get where we advertise typically? And so those signs being on the road is one of the ideas. And then the idea of pop-up vote centers. We briefly mentioned amongst ourselves the Muldoon Library, the Mountain View Library, and then Girdwood also has a library that maybe has space. Of course, we would have to vet these places and make sure that there's actually a room that we could use there. And the idea of the pop-ups would be that we wouldn't necessarily have to go out there and change the locks and do all of the things. They would be pop-up, and so they would come to the election center at 8, pick up their supplies, and then drive them to the vote center that would be open until 4, balance everything out, and then bring them back to the election center and put all of the confidential stuff in the election center to secure it overnight. And so thinking 1 to 2 days at each of the locations could be helpful. And we would be open to hearing other ideas for locations for both a static vote center and pop-up vote centers. Right now, our static vote centers are the Eagle River Community Center, Chambers,
City Hall.
in City Hall. And so we certainly have one team already established with the Wilda Marston that we could create another static place, which is what I was thinking might be the ASD building if they were willing to do that. And then the pop-ups, we would create another team of 4 to 5 to pop around. So I'll leave that idea with you guys to think about. Another concept I wanted to discuss today is amending the code to allow voters to update their signatures on file with our office. So now that we have this database where we get signatures from the state and put them into our database where we can prioritize keeping the wet signatures, they have all still been from the voters registration database. But the code currently says that a valid signature is one that is on file with the voters registration database. And so this is a crazy idea, but what are your thoughts to allowing people to come into the clerk's office or the election center, filling out a form, showing an ID, this is who I am, this is my voter registration number, 2 identifiers, and this is my signature. So maybe we have not a great one on file. They consistently get no sig match letters. I think we've determined that there's like 50 people every year from one year to the next that consistently get no sig match. And so that would require a code change in Title 28. And so just another maybe crazy idea to to think about, since we now have the capability of storing and potentially, I mean, we have the cure letters too, so. So those were two of the big ones. The other one that I wanted to talk about is live streaming. The code currently requires that we live stream 24/7. And after taking some threats trainings over the last couple of years, I'm somewhat worried about people being able to watch that and know what kinds of vehicles all the election workers drive, know what time we arrive, what time we leave, and that type of thing. And so I was curious if there was an appetite to switch that to just be on at night. People can come and watch our processes between 8 and 5 as we are there. And so if they wanted the transparency that there was nobody there and nobody doing any work from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., we could start the live stream at 5 p.m. when we're leaving and still run the script to change it so that it retains every 12 hours. So it would run a script at like 8 p.m. to start over again and then have 12 hours to 8 a.m. And so in 2021, it looks like there were about 3,500 views, and that was when the election center was closed. In 2022, it went down to 1,500 views. 2023 down to 1,000 views. In 2024, there was 600 views in the regular election and 286 views for the runoff election. And then in 2025, there were 208 views.
Yeah, during the day, and then 181 views at night for 2 months.
And so as we get ready to do our Title 28 updates, those were just topics that we wanted to talk about and see, so we could look at the code and see if anything needs to be changed or if there's any other ideas that we might need to look at Title 28 for.
Great. All right, I have a couple folks in the queue. Let's go ahead and just take these items one by one. So we'll start with the pop-up vote centers and then the possible change of one of the permanent ABCs. So on this one, for the pop-ups, were you considering downtown? Is that on your list?
We're open. City Hall is downtown, so
That's true.
we,
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you don't need two downtown,
but
do
we
you?
are open to any ideas
Yeah.
that might have
I was just thinking,
high traffic, really.
yeah, and maybe the member from North Anchorage. I was just thinking of like one that would be fairly accessible for East Downtown. Yeah. Well, if we do one in the Mountain View Library, I think that would be fairly accessible for that community, but particularly for East Downtown Fairview, I don't know if there's a particular location. Maybe the rec center is a location that would make sense for a pop-up. Not sure. And then are there, particularly for the pop-ups, so I imagine for an AVC, there are all kinds of policies in place around, like, do the ballots get stored at the AVC until it's closed? How does that all work? Yes, okay.
The ballots get stored in the vote centers overnight. They close down, they do their ballot accountability, they put their ballots into the ballot transfer bag and zip tie it shut. And then on the rounds the next day, the drop box workers do their rounds and they pick up the ballots from the vote centers and bring them back to, so they,
Okay, so then would you have to update policies on how to handle pop-ups? Because I imagine it wouldn't be storing overnight. It would just, at the end of the day, where would the ballots go?
Right, so right now the vote center's hours are 9 AM to 6 PM. And so they close at 6, balance out, and then are usually leaving about 6:30. So unless we could find places that would allow us to change the locks, because we have our own election core that we install indoors all over town. We would have to close at 4 so that they'd be balanced by 4:30 and bring the ballots back to the election center by 5. And so it could be that policies, or we would probably look at the code too to confirm.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. All right. So, Member Civils, did you have on this one?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to suggest the Muldoon Library, maybe
Library.
as a place.
For a pop-up?
Yeah.
Do you know the space restrictions there?
I don't.
Great, thank you. Member Johnson?
Yeah, thank you. I think I generally like the idea of pops up. I mean, where we can encourage people to vote and make it easier. I would at least want to introduce this as something to think about or discuss. But if we're going to do this, to make sure we do it in a way that feels equitable, right? I can imagine that if we had some districts with 2 or 3 pop-up centers and others with 0 or 1, some voters might feel disenfranchised, or perhaps like they're are not given equal access.
Right, and now at this point, I think we have one in Midtown, one in downtown, and one in Eagle River, so they're not currently exactly equitable.
No, they're not right now in the status quo. But I think if we're
yeah,
talking, so
the hope would be to get us more equitable and get East Anchorage and South and potentially and West.
yeah, I guess I'm not here to say like I think I know what the best system is, but I want us to have something we can point to say here's how we think this is being done
Sure.
fairly, whether it's by district or population center, something like that.
Thanks. Any other thoughts on that particular idea before we move on to the next one? Cool. All right. Yeah, would be, at least from my perspective, I like it. Thumbs up. So next one is updating signatures on file. So I did have some thoughts, and then if other members had thoughts on that one. So when you go through the cure process, how many of those, you said on average 50 people every year, how many of those go through the cure process and get the solution? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but these were numbers where they got sent a cure letter, and I'm not sure if they cured, so I can look into that.
Yeah, and I guess the reason that I ask is like if we already have a process for those 50 to permanent fix, sure, would be better. But if we have a process in place that those 50 already can get fixed, then like that's also a good starting point. Do people, are we getting new people that are added to that list of 50, or is it like the same group of folks who have horrible handwriting?
So I think it's a new list every year that is on the no sig match list. There's only about 50 that are on one year and then again the next year. And through the cure process, if they do cure, we make that signature good. And so then that signature is added to the database. So yes, that process is already there and does allow us to use that new signature. And I really have no insight as to how helpful it would be, other than it's just something we could potentially offer to, hey, avoid getting a letter. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead, Member Johnson.
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious, and maybe we don't know because these signatures aren't in the database. But I'm wondering if these are people who, their signatures just different, or perhaps, I mean, we're talking about maybe a small part of the population that may have some disability that makes it hard for them to make a consistent signature year to year. I mean, if we're talking about such a small portion of the population, I guess I'm kind of wondering, like, we go through this and still be left with 50 people because these are 50 people with like some sort of neurogenic disability that makes it hard for them to really sign consistently.
I'm pretty sure by looking at the signatures, it's not a disability.
Okay,
It's like one year they look very slanty and this year they look much different. It's not a disability. We can see somebody get shaky over time.
okay,
Or if they have a sudden situation that they can't sign at all, you know, we allow the X's with the witness signature. And so we can honestly see when we look at the X signatures, we can see, oh, they were getting shaky over time and now they're signing an X. So you can see the progression over time. But for these no sig matches, they just flat do not look anything like it had in the past. So
okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks for raising that point. I guess the only other thing that I had on that is, I imagine that we would want some type of deadline in place that you would have to, maybe it should be coincide with the registration deadline of you have to change your vote. If you're gonna do this, do it no later than X.
yeah, for
It
sure.
would have to be sooner than that.
Because we're getting all that from the state like the first week of February.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else on this one? All right. So yeah, again, generally speaking for myself, I don't see any opposition to that. Well, I don't oppose that idea. All right, live streaming 24/7, changing to only when no one is working in the elections center. Thoughts on that one? Member Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't socialized this yet, but I can imagine people having some concerns if saying we're not able to see what's happening in the voting center as the activities are happening, that might raise some transparency concerns. But I also respect that we want to make sure our workers feel safe. I mean, is it possible just to point the cameras a little bit more intentionally to where, you know, we can see what's happening where the votes are being counted, but maybe not the parking lot, or other ways we can manage that? Or I don't know, can you put like a delay in the feed to give people a little bit more security? Just
What was that?
like a delay in the feed, like, you know,
Oh.
it's broadcasted on a, I don't know, 10-15 minute delay or something like that, so people can't see exactly when you're walking out. I don't know, just trying to think, how do we sort of thread the needle between making sure that we're not raising transparency concerns, but also keeping folks safe?
We can look at the delay in feed. I think that one of the, maybe we just move that Dropbox. We have a Dropbox right by the front door of the election center. And so the idea about the camera right outside the front door that gets the parking lot is that the Dropbox is right there. And so we'd like the camera on the Dropbox 24/7. So I guess we could potentially look at moving that Dropbox. So that it doesn't grab the cars.
Overall, I know that live streaming has become sort of a trend across the country. Do you see that trend continuing as a 24/7, or what changes do you see in that trend?
Do you have any feedback on 24/7? I don't think I know of any other jurisdictions that do live streaming.
Not in 24/7.
So
So it sounds like we're a little bit of an outlier possibly in that.
yeah, and we could do
Okay.
research too. Liz is in classes to get certified election administrator, and so she is in classes a lot with many other jurisdictions and could maybe pull her classmates.
Great. All right, I don't see anyone else chomping at the bit there. Okay. Anything else on elections?
Not from us.
Any other just general thoughts on elections that members have? Okay, so can you give us a timeline? So typically, this Title 28 update comes to us, or you try to get it to us by like fall, early winter?
Yeah, in the past, I think we've tried to get it before the election commission, like September, October-ish, so that it could be, and then also maybe what we try to do is get it before the commission in August so that we could get it before this committee in September, October, so that it could be before the full assembly in. We try to introduce it before the budget and then you approve it after the budget, give you some time with it while you don't have to think about the budget stuff. Is the goal. That's sort of the timeline. And this year we will try to dovetail that with the ranked choice voting ordinance that already has a public hearing for September 9th. Try to make sure that our edits and those edits match up and also,
Great. Yeah, that'll be a fun little exercise, I'm sure. All right. Then, like I had said earlier, on the unnumbered AO regarding the ranked choice voting, I think Chair Constant had hoped to speak a little bit to his intent with that particular ordinance in terms of process. But unfortunately, he's not here today and he didn't get a chance to share something with me in advance. So perhaps at our next meeting, we'll focus a little bit more on that particular ordinance and talk about process that the sponsor was hoping to go through in this committee. So I'll move us on to unfinished business. I don't see anything. Any other topics folks want to bring up before I go to audience participation? Okay, not seeing anything. Then let's go ahead and do audience participation. Would any members of the audience like to participate? Do we have anyone on the phone? Okay, no one on the phone. All right, I don't see anyone coming in person. Then, great, we are done early. Thanks, everyone.